Hello and welcome to the Young Entrepreneur Syndicate podcast. Jim Riley here with my partner and friend, Rod Kuntz.
Hi, Jim Riley. Good to see you.
Hey, we're on fire this week. I love what's happening. I love our community and the Young Entrepreneur Syndicate. It's been a great time. I love the topics that we've been covering. Man, I just wish more people were there to learn.
Can never be enough.
The topic this last Monday was the fortune is in the follow-up. That was you, Rod. Love that. Love the topic.
Well, that gets into soft skills again, doesn't it? What we're always talking about, soft skills. Let's go, right?
It does. And thank you for teaching that class. And we had some great questions with our group. So the last podcast, we talked about values-based leadership and, kind of wearing those values on your sleeve, whether you're an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur. And the topic for this week, or this show, I should say, because we're pushing 2 out this week, is take a history lesson, read a book. Ooh. Take a history lesson, read a book. And I want to thank you, and get this back to you, as I just finished 7 Men and the Secret of Their Greatness by Eric Metaxas. Is it Metaxas? Yeah.
Metaxas, yeah.
What a great history lesson. And, yes, I just finished the book, so I'm on fire for the content that I just read. It was a quick read, 7 sit downs. So, I broke it up per person. And, we have an incredible history. And I'm looking at all the books in the background, on the Zoom call behind you, and I'm looking at the books in the background behind me. And gosh, what a wealth of information available at our fingertips, whether you buy a book online through Amazon and it ships to you and you get to actually hold the book and read it, or if you get a Kindle version, or if you listen to audio tapes. I mean, there is zero excuse for not excelling and educating and becoming a better person with all the resources we have at our fingertips. And I can't imagine, just spending time or too much time in front of a TV or a video game when the depth of the information that's out there just in books alone is astonishing. And I know you feel the same.
I do. And what came to mind when you talked about, just the books behind you and I on our own bookshelves, and believe me, I've gotten rid of a lot of my books and then I regret it.
Yeah,
they're like kids. I was like, oh, I knew that was there. And there is no excuse, but think about one of the 7 wonders of the natural world was the library at Alexandria. A wonder of the world, a library. And we don't even have it anymore. We hear about how great it must have been. And we've got the Library of Congress. Mm-hmm. We have books galore. And we take it for granted, but they had a wealth of information at their fingertips, and I shouldn't say idolized it, but they held it in a prominent position. Everybody knew that they were one of the greatest civilizations because they read and they recorded and they learned from history. And then something happened, right? Mm-hmm. Their society evolved and they gave up that value, that very important value, and they got sidetracked and an entire civilization collapsed. So there's a lesson here. We better be back into the books, get your nose in the books and I love that you brought up Metaxas's book because it's inspiring. And that's what history should do for us, is inspire us.
Well, look, this is an entrepreneurial podcast, with some soft skills. And that's where I want to take this because, when you look at the value of what you can read, and by the way, most, if not all, successful CEOs, entrepreneurs read books regularly. It's part of their routine. And why not? Because of what you'll learn and also the inspiration from reading those books. And so in particular, I wanted to bring up some of the men that were talked about in this book, because I think it portrays a picture that's important to understand about the value of reading, what you can get out of it, and how you can be inspired by others' lives and what they've done, and realize, especially in the men that are portrayed in this book, they're incredible human beings at the end of their careers, but they didn't start out that way, all of them.
Right.
To go backwards a little bit, Charles Colson, he was he was Nixon's top man. He was the guy that led the charge for Nixon straight into Watergate, and he went to jail for it. And in jail, he developed the prison ministries, something that we hear about worldwide now. And it's like, how did he come about? What transpired in his life where he went from being, the president of the most powerful man in the world, his right-hand man, really leading the charge, all the way to jail, back out of jail, and then developing one of the most successful Reformation programs that we've ever seen, and that's in the prison system. Talk about inspiration from, going from nothing to something, and then back down to nothing, and then back up to something again. He passed away a few years ago, but what a phenomenal opportunity to learn about somebody that had no clue who he was.
Yeah. And for the 7 stories in that book, there are thousands of those stories throughout our country. And in fact, each one of those could, and some of them do have biographies or autobiographies, where we can dive in deeper to some of those things and figure out what was happening. But number one, you have to be willing. You have to be a willing vessel if you're going to have change. And there's nothing saying that you can't go from the bottom all the way to the top.
Mm-hmm.
If you start at the bottom, or if you've been at the top, like this gentleman, and then you have a crash landing, you can always pick up the pieces. There's, as my father always said, there's always hope.
Well, and what I like about that particular story, Rod, is that we all have things that we go through. We talked about it on this show. You had a heart attack last year, and you're way on the other side of that now. We all have things that will derail what we're doing. And we feel like we're the only one suffering, the only one in this type of pain, the only one failing at something. And the reality is that we're not. People that have come before us again and again and again, many of which are portrayed in these books, in that history lesson I'm talking about, to help encourage us to get through what we're going through and get to the other side and do something spectacular on the other side of that. Take what you've learned, take your failure, your hardship, your poor health, get out of that and come to the other side of it and realize that you're stronger and better for it.
Absolutely. And I wasn't going to talk about this tonight, but now that you've brought this topic up, I'm almost forced to. And the fact that this episode isn't going to air right away gives me the license to do so. My mother passed away a few days ago, and I've been asked to do the eulogy. And my mother, we've talked about her on the Young Entrepreneur Syndicate, my relationship with her, et cetera. And it wasn't always the best, but she did the best she could. That's what the long and the short of it was. She did the best that she could. And if you're doing your best, you can't be faulted for doing your best. If you've got other issues, other things that come up that's preventing you from overcoming or whatever, that's one thing. But what I want to mention here is my mother for years said she wanted to write a book. And she wasn't a reader or a writer, but she had stories in her head. She could tell story after story after story. And she lived through a lot, from poverty to, being a nursing career for 50 years. And the title of her book, she had the title, it's all she ever did. The title of her book was All the Things I've Seen and Been Nowhere. And the truth of it is that her nowhere is the somewhere that I started. Everyone has to be from somewhere. And her nowhere, she was living in her nowhere. She was never satisfied with her lot in life. She always thought she could be better and do better and wanted more. And she went after that kind of stuff. It was the materialistic things that she didn't have. But at the same point in time, a part of her loved where she came from. She couldn't get away from the life on the farm and the going through lack and struggle and hardship. She embraced that part of it. She just didn't relish it.
Mm.
And it's too bad she didn't make that bridge, because I think she would have found that the nowhere could be a somewhere.
Sure.
You can be happy right where you are and literally send your roots down deep and your shoots up high, and you can turn nowhere or nothing into something. And as an entrepreneur, that's what we're challenged to do. We are challenged to take nothing and turn it into something. And what a challenge. But if we look at it as, well, I've got nothing, you're going to have nothing when you're done. But if you have a dream, if you have a vision, and it lines up with your values and your passions and your talents and the knowledge that you choose to acquire, you cannot be stopped. So that's a little segue into what I'm going to be talking about. But I'm from somewhere. You're from somewhere.
Yeah.
And we have to embrace that and then take it to the next level, always to the next level.
Well, and just bringing it back to take a history lesson and read a book, is that there's so many stories, just like your mom's, of people that have achieved or not achieved or made decisions. And by reading and learning, we can make choices for ourselves and realize that, we can make something of where we're at. Couple other people that were mentioned in this book that, just to point out, that I thought were fascinating is Jackie Robinson's life, the first Black baseball player. And It wasn't even about baseball, because I'm not a baseball person, but the life he led before baseball and the challenges and how he came into the game was absolutely fascinating to me. It wasn't on his radar to the degree that you would think, especially with somebody like Jackie. So I love that story, and I'm not going to tell the stories here. I want people to pick up the book. The other story that I thought was fascinating, if you're old enough to remember, Chariots of Fire, and the runner was Eric Liddell, and he won an Olympic gold in the 400, and the quick synopsis on that, again, I'm not going to tell the story, but I'll tell you what I think is cool about it is, so he was slated to run the 100 in the Olympics. That was his sport. That it was like 99% sure he'd win the gold, but because they were going to run the Olympics on a Sunday, he vowed not to run, because that's the holy day for him, and he doesn't do anything on a Sunday. Despite the disappointment of the entire country, he committed to running the 400 and had very little time to prepare for it, but he wound up winning the gold in the 400, which is amazing. But what's crazy about this, and again, this is what I love about the history lesson and just not allowing the story to unfold. The movie ends there. It doesn't go into his persecution and the time that he spent in China as a missionary, and then going into prison and ultimately being killed in a camp, or not killed, but he fell ill with a brain tumor, but he didn't have medical because he was in a prisoner of war camp. It's like, what an incredible human being that we can all aspire to be and do more, So there's obviously 4 other individuals in the book, but worth reading and taking a history lesson. Read a book.
And not only, if you want to read a book, you can go to our website at the YoungEntrepreneurSyndicate.com and look at our referral library. And I believe that book is in our referral library, is it not?
If it's updated, it is.
I believe that it is.
If not, it's 7 Men and the Secret of Their Greatness. And I highly recommend this book. It's an easy read. And Eric does do some deep dives on a few of the people that he mentions here, because it's more of a highlight reel for their lives. But I'm inspired. I'm inspired, and what it did is it encouraged me just to jump right into the next book. So,
right.
Look, the thing is, Rod, I want to be a better leader.
Absolutely.
I want to be a better entrepreneur. I want to be a better coach. I want to be a better consultant. And I realize that with all these tools available to us, that I can be that thing that I want to be. I just need to commit the time and have the discipline to dive in and learn and take away. Even if I just take away one sentence in a 300, 400 page book, if that helps change the trajectory of what I'm doing, it was worth it.
Absolutely. And what do we always say? We paid the dummy tax so you don't have to.
That's right.
History books are the same way. You can learn from so many other people's mistakes without having to do it yourself. You don't have to do it the hard way. And you mentioned earlier, there's no excuse. If you don't have money for a book, go to your library. Get a library card. They're free.
That's right.
Trust me. And they have audiobooks. You can get audiobooks from the library as well. And Kindle books, there's free. They're 99 cents. I mean, there's just no excuse not to read, not to get in there and expand your mind and be inspired, be motivated, and most important, to learn. We're learning all the time.
Yeah.
And it stretches the brain a little bit, doesn't it? Sometimes it's like, how did they do that? And it's like, I ask myself, some of the characters in that book, could I have done that? And, probably not with some of what those people did. If I had the choice, it'd be like, can I do it another way? But they were courageous. And one of my favorites, you want to be inspired, reading things, and there are several different, none of these are on the site, but you could look them up. They're Medal of Honor winner stories. And they're actually books that collect all of them from, all the way back to Revolutionary War Medal of Honor winners and on up. And you have to ask yourself, could you have done that? Could you have made those kind of sacrifices and become heroic and great? Because we all have it in us. And if we look at it and we think, no, we can't, when push comes to shove, you can. And we should push ourselves to that point.
Absolutely. I'm going to close on that point. And actually, I want to say one more thing, then I'll close. And we've said this before on the show, business is hard. Entrepreneurship is hard. Being a successful entrepreneur is hard, but there's a tremendous amount of reward for that hard that you put in. And it's one of the things that I love about reading stories and these books and getting that history lesson I talked about in the topic here, is that you realize that on the other side of that hard is a great story. And if you're willing, don't just give the title of the book, write your own book and tell your story so that everybody, other people can hear it. So anyways, if you like what we're talking about, there's more of that at the Young Entrepreneur Syndicate. We'd love to have you in our community. And we push these shows out every week. So join us. Tell a friend, actually. Yeah. Rod, good to talk to you.
Pass it on. Thank you, Jim. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Right on.